The joke that went too far. The mess hall of Outpost Ver. 9 was always loud, a chorus of voices and clattering trays as soldiers from 20 different species mingled. The air smelled of recycled oxygen, tangy spice oils from the Shiken rations, and the ever-present hint of sterilizers. To most, it was simply another day in training. To Korvac, however, it was an opportunity. The reptilian bruiser towered above nearly everyone, 7 feet of scaled muscle, with jagged teeth that gleamed when he laughed. He had built his reputation on intimidation. Korvac mocked recruits until they broke, shoved them during drills, and staged harmless jokes that left others nursing bruises. It was his way of reinforcing his dominance. And today, his target was the quiet human soldier. Private Daniel Cross sat at the edge of a long table, eating the grayish protein block on his tray as if it were fine cuisine. He didn't laugh much, didn't speak unless spoken to, and never rose to provocation. To Korvac, that made him perfect prey. Humans were new to the Alliance military. After all, fragile, pink-skinned mammals from some backwater planet. Korvac lumbered over, the floor vibrating under each step. His entourage of fellow recruits followed close behind, eager for the show. He jabbed a clawed finger at Daniel's food. "Is that what your kind eats? No wonder you're so small." Korvac sneered, his voice carrying across the mess hall. Heads turned. Conversations quieted. Daniel looked up, calm blue eyes meeting the alien's yellow slits. He didn't rise to the bait. He just kept chewing, methodical, steady. Korvac snarled, "What's the matter, human? No spine, no words." He leaned closer, letting his teeth glisten under the lights. "Maybe you need some encouragement." Before anyone could intervene, Korvac's fist lashed out. His scaled knuckles slammed into Daniel's jaw with a crack that echoed through the hall. The crowd gasped. Some laughed, expecting the human to crumple. But Daniel didn't fall. The blow snapped his head to the side, tray clattering to the floor. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, slowly, Daniel turned his gaze back. His cheek was already bruising, but his eyes were ice. He rose from his seat with calm precision, no wasted motion. The laughter died. "You shouldn't have done that," Daniel said, voice level but carrying the kind of weight that made even the rowdy mess hall hold its breath. Korvac opened his mouth to retort, but he never got the chance. Daniel moved. It wasn't a wild swing, not a brawler's flail. It was surgical. His fist shot forward with startling speed, striking just below Korvac's jawline. The reptilian's head snapped back, and a spray of blood and saliva arced into the air. Korvac stumbled, eyes wide with shock, before collapsing to the floor with a heavy thud. The entire hall erupted, some shouting in disbelief, others frozen in stunned silence. Daniel exhaled once, flexed his hand, and sat back down at the table. He picked up what remained of his protein block from the tray and resumed eating as though nothing had happened. Medics rushed in, hauling Korvac away on a stretcher. His jaw was fractured, one tooth missing, and a deep gash stretched across his scaled chin where Daniel's knuckles had torn flesh. The wound would scar. Rumors spread instantly. By the time the mess hall emptied, whispers of the human who dropped Korvac echoed through every corridor of the outpost. Daniel ignored them all. He hadn't wanted to fight. He hadn't asked for attention. He was a soldier, trained to defend himself, nothing more. But he knew one truth as he finished his meal. The outpost would never look at him, or at humans, the same way again. The reputation spreads. By the next rotation, the story had already left the mess hall. From the dormitories to the firing ranges, from the training pits to the bars tucked into the corners of Outpost Ver. 9. The tale spread with each retelling. Some claimed the human broke Korvac's jaw in 3 places. Others swore Daniel never even stood. He simply lifted a hand, and the reptilian giant fell. By the time the story reached the flight deck crews, it had grown into legend. A single human soldier had knocked out a warrior who once wrestled a Kroth war beast barehanded. Daniel ignored it all. He rose each day at 0500, ran the kilometer track until his lungs burned, then joined the squad for drills. He moved with quiet discipline, saying little, doing much. If the others whispered as he passed, he didn't acknowledge it. If they stared at him during weapons practice, he pretended not to notice. But he did notice. Where before, aliens had smirked at his size or muttered fragile mammal under their breath, now they kept their distance. Some offered curt nods of respect. A few, mostly the younger recruits, looked at him with wide-eyed admiration. The only one who didn't stay silent was Korvac. The reptilian emerged from the infirmary 4 days later, jaw stiff with surgical plating, a thin scar running down his chin like a lightning strike. The missing tooth left a dark gap when he snarled, which was often. He said little, but his eyes followed Daniel everywhere, yellow irises glowing with hate. In the barracks, his entourage had shifted uneasily. They no longer laughed when he spoke of humans. They no longer joined his jibes. The scar had made them reconsider the invincible Korvac, and by extension, the small, quiet human who had put it there. It came to a head one evening during endurance drills. The recruits were ordered to run weighted laps in full combat armor. By the 5th lap, sweat and exhaustion had slowed most to a crawl. Daniel, though smaller than the others, carried his load with steady rhythm, eyes locked forward. His breathing was rough but controlled, each step hammering the track with unrelenting pace. When the timer buzzed, half the recruits collapsed on the ground. Daniel stayed upright, chest heaving, eyes still coldly focused. The instructor, a grizzled Clarion officer, barked approval. That's how you survive a battlefield. Not by being the biggest, not by being the loudest, by refusing to stop. His compound eyes lingered on Daniel as he spoke. The message was not lost on the others. Later, in the barracks, a Shiken recruit approached Daniel hesitantly. The avian's feathers ruffled with nervous energy. You fought Korvac, the Shiken said, and you beat him. Daniel shook his head. I defended myself. That's all. But you didn't fall. The Shiken's eyes gleamed. Everyone else falls. Daniel didn't reply. He simply tightened the straps on his boots and continued with his routine. Yet the words followed him. Everyone else falls. Korvac heard the whispers too. Each one chipped at his pride, gnawed at his identity. For cycles, he had been the predator of the barracks, the one others feared. Now, fear had shifted, and it burned. One night, as the squad filed into the dining hall, Korvac deliberately slammed his tray down across from Daniel. The sound silenced the table. You think you're better than me, human? He growled, voice low, dangerous. Daniel looked at him once, then calmly speared a cube of nutrient paste with his fork. I don't think about you at all. The words cut deeper than any fist. Korvac's claws curled against the table edge, scraping gouges in the metal. He wanted to strike, to reclaim his pride, but he didn't. Not with every eye in the room waiting, watching, ready to see whether he would lose again. He stood abruptly, stalked away, and the whispers resumed. This time, they weren't about Daniel. They were about Korvac, about how the predator had become prey. Daniel finished his meal in silence. Respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned quietly through strength and discipline. And whether he wanted it or not, the outpost was beginning to respect the humans. When jokes turned deadly, the training exercise was supposed to be routine. Sirens echoed through the corridors as recruits sprinted toward the simulation bays. The drill's purpose: prepare soldiers for close-quarters combat in a controlled environment. The walls shimmered with holographic projectors, turning sterile steel into mock streets, half-ruined buildings, and obstacles designed to test reflexes under fire. Daniel Cross adjusted his helmet, his rifle slung across his chest. Around him, squads moved into position, eyes bright with anticipation. For many, it was a chance to show off. For Daniel, it was just another day of repetition, another step toward survival. Then the alarms changed. The artificial buzz of the training sirens was replaced by a deep, guttural wail. The station-wide emergency klaxon. Red lights strobed across the ceiling. Automated voices blared over the comms. Warning: unauthorized ships breaching Dock Sector 6. All personnel to defensive stations. This is not a drill. The recruits froze. Holograms flickered and died, leaving only the bare steel of the chamber. Pirates, someone whispered. The word spread like wildfire. Panic erupted. Some dropped their rifles, others shouted for orders. Many had never faced real combat. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Form up," he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos like a whip crack. The authority in his tone startled even those who had outranked him on paper. "Shields forward. Find cover and prepare for breach." They moved, more from instinct than obedience, huddling into defensive positions. The bay doors shuddered as muffled explosions rattled the walls. Then the enemy came. The pirates stormed through, hulking shapes in scavenged armor, weapons sparking with stolen tech. Blaster fire lit the chamber in strobe flashes. The first volley cut down 2 recruits who had hesitated in the open. The others screamed, firing wildly, bolts sparking harmlessly against walls. Daniel dropped to one knee, aimed, and fired in steady bursts. His shots found targets, not because of superior weapons, but because he was calm. His earthborn training drilled discipline into every movement. Breathe, aim, squeeze, move. The recruits nearest him steadied, falling into rhythm with his commands. Cover fire, reload, advance. Across the chamber, Korvac roared, charging headlong into the fray. His massive frame smashed into a pirate, claws tearing through armor, but he was reckless, exposed. A second pirate leveled a plasma carbine at his unguarded back. "Down!" Daniel shouted, sprinting from cover. He tackled Korvac aside, just as the plasma bolt seared past, scorching the wall where the reptilian spine had been. The human rolled, came up firing, and dropped the attacker with 2 precise shots. Korvac stared, stunned, not at the enemy, but at the human who had just saved his life. His pride burned, but so did something new: confusion. "Stay in cover," Daniel snapped, pulling him to his feet. "You want to die, do it on your own time." The words were harsh, but they carried weight. Korvac growled, but this time he didn't charge blindly. He fell in beside Daniel, covering angles with surprising discipline. Together, they pushed forward, clearing the chamber one hostile at a time. By the time reinforcements arrived, seasoned Alliance soldiers in full combat gear, the pirates were already retreating, dragging their wounded back through the breach. The recruits stood amidst the smoke and debris, shaken but alive. Many owed that fact to one man. Daniel lowered his rifle, sweat dripping down his face. He scanned the room, ensuring no one else lay bleeding. His eyes found Korvac, who still clutched at his scorched armor where Daniel had shoved him from death. The reptilian's gaze was different now. No mocking sneer, no simmering hate. Just the dawning realization that the human wasn't a fragile mammal at all. He was something far more dangerous. A soldier who didn't break, didn't panic, and didn't hesitate when lives were on the line. As medics arrived and the dead were counted, silence hung over the recruits. None of them would forget what they had seen, the human who had turned panic into survival. And Korvac, touching the scar on his jaw, realized that his humiliation had only been the beginning of his education. The tooth, the scar, and the lesson. The outpost was quiet in the days following the pirate raid. The charred walls of the training chamber still bore scars of the firefight, a grim reminder that what was supposed to be a simple drill had turned into a blood-soaked baptism. For the recruits, everything had changed. The story spread faster than fire and dry brush. The human had taken command when officers were absent, had steadied the recruits when panic nearly consumed them, and had fought with the kind of precision that turned chaos into order. To some, Daniel Cross was a savior. To others, he was a living warning, proof that the small, quiet species from Earth carried a dangerous edge. Daniel, however, avoided the attention. He filed his reports, attended debriefings, and returned to routine. He spoke little about the fight, even when prodded. For him, it was simple. Lives needed saving, and he had done what was necessary. Nothing more. But not everyone saw it that way. In the mess hall one evening, whispers once again swirled around Daniel as he ate. He ignored them until a shadow fell across his table. Korvac. The reptilian still bore the scar across his jaw and the dark gap where a tooth had once gleamed. Now, he also bore a new scorch mark across his armor, a reminder of the plasma bolt that would have ended him if not for Daniel. The hall hushed as Korvac set his tray down across from the human. For a moment, silence reigned, every recruit waiting to see if old tensions would reignite. Instead, Korvac spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "You should have let me fall." Daniel looked up, his face unreadable. "Not my style." Korvac grunted, claws drumming against the table. "I mocked you. I struck you. I wanted to humiliate you. And still, you saved me." His yellow eyes narrowed. "Why?" Daniel set down his fork. "Because you're not my enemy. Out there." He jerked his chin toward the scarred walls of the outpost. "They are. If you fall, we all fall. Simple as that." The words carried across the hall, quiet but heavy. For the first time since arriving at the outpost, Korvac didn't sneer. He didn't bare his teeth. He simply sat, staring at the human across from him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. After a long pause, he extended a clawed hand. "I underestimated you," Korvac admitted. "I will not do so again." Daniel studied the hand for a heartbeat, then clasped it. His grip was firm, steady, without hesitation. The hall exhaled as one, the tension dissolving into a low murmur. From that day forward, Korvac no longer mocked the human. In training, he fell in a step beside him. In sparring, he measured himself against Daniel not to humiliate, but to learn. The scar on his jaw became less a mark of shame and more a badge of respect, a reminder of the lesson one human had taught him. High Command took notice too. Reports of Daniel's composure and leadership reached the desks of Alliance officers who had once questioned Earth's contribution to the military. Whispers grew in the upper ranks, the kind that spread from one sector to another. The humans are not weak. They are dangerous in ways we didn't predict. For the recruits of Outpost Ver 9, the lesson was already carved in memory. They had seen a human take a bully's punch and give back more than a scar. They had seen him stand unflinching in battle when stronger, larger species faltered. And they had seen him extend a hand, even to the one who least deserved it. One evening, weeks later, Korvac sat beside Daniel during a rare moment of quiet. He tapped the scar on his chin and chuckled, a rough, rasping sound. "Funny thing about scars," he said. "They remind you of your mistakes, but they also remind you who taught you better." Daniel smirked faintly. "Guess that makes us even." Korvac's laugh boomed across the barracks, startling recruits who had never heard him laugh before. And so the story lived on. Not just of the punch that had left the scar, but of the human who refused to fall, who turned humiliation into respect, and who showed the galaxy that humanity was no joke. Because scars fade, teeth can be replaced, but reputations? Reputations spread forever.